When we're talking about BAH fraud and communicating with your command, what should somebody actually do, whether they're guilty or not, to make sure that they are within their rights and also protect any kind of problem with a court-martial in the future?
Well, the biggest thing that needs to occur is they need to get their BAH corrected and fixed. Whether they've inadvertently received BAH they're not entitled to, whether it was intentional, it needs to get fixed. And there are instances where people inadvertently or negligently receive the wrong BAH. I mean, I've seen that countless times. This typically happens when someone's PCSing to Korea on an unaccompanied tour, and at the time of their orders, you have individuals who've never gone to Korea and don't understand how the DoD FMR or the JTR works. They're very complicated. And so at finance, when they're getting the orders, they're going to say, well, where is your spouse going to live while you're in Korea? People will ask service members this. And so they'll say, well, my spouse is going to go back to Honolulu. And maybe they're from Hawaii. Maybe they have family there. Maybe the intent was always to go back to Honolulu, and it just happened to be a very high BH amount. Service member goes and in processes over at Camp Humphreys, Korea, and a family situation comes up where the spouse says, I can't go to Honolulu for whatever reason. And whatever reason, they're going to stay maybe at their home station at maybe it's Fort Lawton, Oklahoma. And now they're in a position where they answered the question on the orders, where is your spouse going to live? And it honestly was Hawaii. Maybe it honestly was San Francisco or New York or Miami or another high-cost location. But, Hawaii is a good one because a lot of people do live there and they do have family members there, or maybe they were stationed there. And now months go by and a decision is made where the family decides not to go back to Hawaii. So now you've got a service member receiving Honolulu BAH and their family never left Oklahoma. Maybe they were trying to sell their house and their house never sold. And maybe they were going to sell a house there and a buyer fell through and they're going to keep their family in the house until it sells. It's been 3-4 months and they're still living in Oklahoma, but they're receiving BAH in Hawaii. Well, that's not fraud. Fraud requires a criminal intent. You have to intend to steal from the government. That's not fraud. What has occurred there is, your plans have changed. So what needs to happen in a situation like that, it needs to be corrected as soon as possible. And in a situation like that, you can go to your command or to finance and say, I need to correct my BAH because my family is no longer living or is not living in Hawaii, even though that was the objective. And do that immediately or do that as soon as possible. There's nothing wrong with life changes and plans can change. So if that's the situation, do engage your chain of command, engage finance, and get it done immediately and make sure you have a paper trail of it and be prepared to pay that money back. And so if you're receiving a higher cost of BAH and know your spouse isn't there or they haven't arrived yet, don't spend the money. Keep the money aside because you're going to have to pay it back. Now, all of that being said, please read the forms. It's called a Start-Stop BAH form. And the form is going to say where your family is presently residing. And if you filled out Honolulu, Hawaii, and they were residing in Lawton, Oklahoma, that can be looked at as a false official statement. But here's the reality of this situation. You are a young service member or even an officer or an NCO. You've never been OCONUS. You go through a process where finance or your command says, fill this out, fill this out, fill this out. How many times have we been in a room where forms are passed? Say, everyone pass a form down to your left. Okay, here's how you fill out block 1. Here's how you fill out block 2. For block 3 on the Start-Stop BAH form, list where your spouse is going to be. That's how these presentations are often given. So if that's the case, you never intended to falsify a document. This comes down to one of intent. Okay, so if this is your situation and it absolutely happens, engage your command, engage finance, and get it fixed immediately. If it looks like this is a situation where they believed you've defrauded someone or it was larceny or you're advised of your rights or CID is involved, stop talking to them and seek counsel. Now, on the other hand, let's do a different situation. You're PCSing to Korea and you're from Lawton, Oklahoma, but your spouse has never been to Hawaii. Maybe she has never thought about Hawaii, but a buddy of yours said, hey, if you claim Hawaii BAH, you're going to get $4,000 a month instead of $1,800. You can make a quick $30,000 on your unaccompanied tour in Korea. If that is the case, for God's sakes, don't go tell your command that. You're going to go to prison. Don't tell CID that. that is the scenario where you need to talk to TDS counsel, or more than likely on something that's specialized, look to retain civilian counsel who understands how this works and get that unwound. What's going to happen is you're going to have to change your orders. You have to change the pinpoint orders. You're going to have to do a new start-stop BH form. And it is a lot of work to do that. And we're going to have a scenario for why this occurred. And that sure as hell can't be, I was trying to make money so I can buy a new Challenger, because you're going to go to prison. Okay. So the scenarios are different. And if you're watching this video, be honest with yourself. Were you trying to steal money from the government? Were you trying to make a quick buck and now you're worried about going to prison? Or was it an honest mistake? Because that's really the driver into what actions you should take. I've seen so many scenarios where someone will fill out a start-stop BH form and they're told what to write, because we've all been to these briefings like, oh, on block 3, write where your family's going to be. And there's 30 people in a briefing and you're scribbling out where they're going to be, and then plans change and now you're accused of BH fraud. That's common. That's not fraud, though. That's not larceny, because there's no intent to steal. Where, another case, we had someone, it's kind of funny, we had someone PCS to Korea and they listed a strip club outside of San Francisco as the address. Not kidding. So they did an RFA, or request for assistance, and they went to, it was literally a gentleman's club outside of San Francisco. Now, obviously you don't live there. Now, the inside joke was, hey, he was there so much it was like home, right? But, the reality is he had never lived in San Francisco, didn't want to go to San Francisco. And that's just not just fraud. That's really bad fraud. I mean, that's like the dumbest type of fraud. Or people will find addresses on Zillow, really common. You look on Zillow, find an address, look at Airbnb. That happens all the time. If you're doing that to find an address, you're committing fraud or you're committing larceny, whether you realized it or not, and you need a consultation with an attorney. When it comes to BH fraud, if you're getting overpaid or paid for the wrong location, if this is an honest mistake that you made or your circumstances changed, and you're not trying to defraud or steal from anyone, then certainly you can speak with your chain of command or finance to get this fixed, because it needs to get fixed as soon as possible. But if you're out there committing fraud, you have an intent to steal, you're trying to game the system, you're listing false addresses, then obviously don't speak to your chain of command about this or anyone about it. You need to speak with an attorney immediately and get a consultation to figure out how to unwind this so you don't end up in prison.